The East Sea, or South China Sea as internationally referred, has for decades now become a regional hotspot due to China's repeated acts to realize its territorial ambition. Tension first flared up in 1974 when China forcibly occupied the Paracels from Vietnam. Then it again forcibly took a number of Vietnam's coral reefs in the Spratlys in 1988 and seized control of Mischief Reef from the Philippines in 1995. China has taken increasingly assertive steps to promote a 9-U-shaped line claiming 80% of the East Sea. Lately, China has taken aggressive steps to force its claim, harassing Vietnam's research and exploration vessels, forcibly occupying the Scarborough, imposing fishing bans and even seizing Vietnamese fishermen, destroying their boats and facilities. Most recently, since May 1, 2014, China has placed its giant Haiyang Shiyou 981 oil rig deep inside Vietnam's exclusive economic zone, escalating tension and seriously threatening peace, stability, security, and safe marine and air traffic in the region. China placed the Haiyang Shiyou 981 at 18 nautical miles inside Vietnam's exclusive economic zone, about 119 nautical miles from Vietnam's baseline. As it does so, it has imposed a 1-mile ban around the oil rig, whose radius has later been expanded to 3 miles and at times up to 10 miles. China has also sent in numerous vessels to protect the oil rig, which at some points reached over 130 in number, and included even armed and warships. These ships have aggressively rammed and fired high-power water cannons at approaching Vietnamese law enforcement vessels, causing serious damages to these vessels and injuring a number of Vietnamese personnel. China's placement of the Haiyang Shiyou 981 oil rig deep inside Vietnam's exclusive economic zone is in fact a further step to translate into reality its 9-dash claim of over 80% of the East Sea that borders many ASEAN countries. It has made meticulously synchronized preparations, which include an increased military presence in the East Sea, continuous harassments of fishermen, upgradings of infrastructure facilities at Gagma Rocks, which China violently snatched from Vietnam in 1988, and blocking the Philippine supply vessels to the second Thomas Shoal. In fact, the move can be seen as a test of Vietnam, ASEAN countries, and all other concerned parties. China seemingly assumes that if its noisy, forcible claim goes unchallenged by the international community and the parties concerned, it can then freely move its oil rigs anywhere else inside its unilaterally imposed 9-U-shaped line. China's brazen, belligerent acts have clearly violated Vietnam's sovereignty and international laws. China's violation of Vietnam's sovereignty. The UN Clause Article 57 stipulates, the exclusive economic zone shall not extend beyond 200 nautical miles from the baselines from which the breadth of the territorial sea is measured. However, China has made repeated attempts to divert public attention by stating that its Haiyang Shiyou 981 is located within the contiguous zone of its Trung Chien Islet. Indeed, this Trung Chien Islet is Chi Ton in Vietnamese, located at the western end of the Paracels archipelago, which China forcibly seized from the South Vietnamese administration in 1974, and over which Vietnam has full historical and legal evidence to prove its sovereignty. China's violation of the DOC. At the 8th ASEAN Summit in Phnom Penh, Cambodia in November 2002, ASEAN countries and China signed a Declaration of Conduct of the Parties in the South China Sea, or DOC, which commits all parties to respect the freedom of navigation in and over flight above the East Sea, to exercise self-restraint in the conduct of activities that would complicate or escalate dispute and affect regional stability and peace. China's acts have obviously run against the terms and spirit of the DOC. China's violation of the principles and practices in settling international disputes which ban the threat or use of force. China has resorted to ships of numerous types to repeatedly ram and block Vietnam's law enforcement vessels and fishing boats, watering them with high-power water cannons. They have even deployed missile ships and air patrols for backup, setting at standby all their weapons. With these acts, China is violating two fundamental principles of international laws as provided for by Article 2 of the UN Charter. That is, to settle international disputes by peaceful means and refrain from the threat or use of force. In face of China's acts of Vietnam's violation of its sovereignty, Vietnam has time and again voiced its protests through diplomatic channels to Chinese authorities at different levels to demand China withdraw its oil rig out of Vietnamese waters. Vietnam has also repeatedly reaffirmed its determination to resolutely defend its territorial sovereignty and legitimate interests in accordance with international laws.
Tôi xin khẳng định một lần nữa là Việt Nam sẽ sử dụng mọi biện pháp phù hợp với luật pháp quốc tế để bảo vệ quyền và lợi ích chính đáng của mình. Chính vì vậy, tôi xin thông báo với quý vị là ngày 7 tháng 5 năm 2014, Việt Nam đã cho lưu hành tại Liên Hợp Quốc công hàm phản đối Trung Quốc hạ đặt giàn khoan trái phép trong vùng biển Việt Nam.
In his interviews with AP and Reuters on May the 21st, Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng also reaffirmed that Vietnam would never unilaterally resort to military means, nor ever to initiate any military confrontation unless forced to do so in self-defense. He also stated that Vietnam is consistent in peaceful means and will leave no stone unturned to peacefully resolve the situation through dialogues. China's unilateral and illegal acts of provocation in Vietnam's exclusive economic zone have caused stern condemnations from Vietnamese at home and abroad.
Given the recent history of tensions in the South China Sea, China's unilateral decision to introduce its oil rig into these disputed waters is provocative and unhelpful to the maintenance of peace and stability in the region.
The Paracel Islands, and we are particularly concerned, all nations that are engaged in navigation and traffic within the South China Sea, East China Sea, deeply concerned about this aggressive act.
We have to first of all recognize that there is no military solution to this issue. China is a very strong, important partner to ASEAN, but it must actually deliver on the commitments, on the declaration of conduct that we have all signed on board on.
International media and scholars have also voiced their views that China's move is causing concerns in many countries around the world.
Well, this is pretty simple. The Chinese towed a billion-dollar oil rig about 130 miles off of Vietnam's coast, and they've started to drill. Now, this is clearly within Vietnam's exclusive economic zone. And what's important is that China actually ratified the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which makes it pretty clear that this is Vietnamese waters.
This is a major escalation because of the numbers of ships and because military ships are involved, which is not usually the case with China.
At the recent ASEAN summit in Myanmar, ASEAN foreign ministers also issued a joint statement affirming the concerns over the Chinese placement of its oil rig in the Vietnamese waters and calling on the parties concerned to refrain and respect internationally recognized principles, settle the dispute through peaceful means, ensure the freedom of passage and maritime security and safety in the East Sea, respect the DOC, and soon to work out a code of conduct. Despite protests and condemnations from Vietnam and the international community, China has continued to send more police vessels and military ships to protect its oil rig, further straining the situation. It has not only violated Vietnam's sovereignty rights, but but also seriously threaten peace and stability in the region. China must immediately remove its oil rig and all its ships, vessels and personnel out of Vietnam's exclusive economic zone and compensate for all the damages it has caused to Vietnamese personnel and facilities. It must also see to it that such acts will never recur.
Chúng tôi mong muốn tiếp tục nhận được sự ủng hộ giúp đỡ quý báu, sự đoàn kết hợp tác của cộng đồng quốc tế là hết sức cần thiết để ngăn chặn các hành vi vi phạm pháp luật quốc tế.
We urge all countries and people in the world and all international organizations to continue voicing protests against China's provocative acts and demand that China respect international laws and put an end to all its acts to cause tension and threaten security and peace in the region and the world.